The morning sun shone bright through the big windows of Chicago Airport. People walked everywhere with their suitcases and bags. Some ran to catch their flights. Others sat and waited. The smell of coffee and donuts filled the air from the food shops. Katie Johnson held her daddy's hand tight as they walked through the busy airport. She was only 8 years old, but she was smart and brave. Her long brown hair was tied back in a ponytail, and she wore her favorite blue dress with white flowers on it. Today was supposed to be the best day ever. They were going to Florida to see the ocean and swim with dolphins. Her daddy, Tom Johnson, was a big man with kind eyes and rough hands from working on airplane engines all day. He fixed planes for a living and knew everything about how they worked. He wore his best shirt today because they were going on vacation. He had saved money for months to take his family to Florida. Lisa Johnson, Katie's mommy, walked beside them with a big smile on her face. She had pretty blonde hair and was wearing a new red dress she bought just for the trip. She carried their tickets and kept checking her watch. She had planned everything perfectly for this vacation. The hotel by the beach, the dolphin show, even dinner at a fancy restaurant. "Look, Katie," Lisa said, pointing out the big window. "There's our airplane. Isn't it beautiful?" Katie looked where her mommy pointed and saw the big white airplane sitting on the ground outside. It had blue stripes on the sides and the number 447 painted near the front. Men in orange vests walked around it, checking things and putting bags inside. But when Katie looked at the airplane, something felt very wrong. Her stomach started to hurt, and her hands began to shake. The airplane looked normal to everyone else, but to Katie it looked scary. She could not explain why, but she knew something bad was going to happen. "Daddy," Katie said, pulling on Tom's shirt, "I don't want to get on that airplane." Tom looked down at his little girl and smiled. "Why not, sweetheart? You were so excited yesterday. You couldn't sleep because you wanted to see the dolphins." Katie's eyes filled with tears. She tried to find the right words, but they were hard to say. "That airplane is going to crash, Daddy. I can see it in my head. It's going to fall from the sky." Lisa laughed and bent down to hug Katie. "Oh, honey, you're just nervous about flying. Lots of people get scared before their first airplane ride, but Daddy works on airplanes every day. He knows they're safe." "No, Mommy," Katie said, her voice getting louder. "This is different. I've never felt like this before. The airplane is going to break and everyone inside will get hurt." Other people in the airport started to look at them. A man in a business suit shook his head and walked faster. A woman with 2 kids whispered to her husband. Everyone thought Katie was just being a scared little girl. Tom picked up Katie and held her close. He could feel her heart beating fast, like a little bird. "Katie, what exactly do you see? Can you tell Daddy?" Katie closed her eyes tight and the scary pictures came back to her mind. "I can see the airplane high in the sky. Then something goes wrong with the engine. There's smoke and fire. The airplane starts to fall down fast. People are screaming and crying, then it hits the water with a big splash." The pictures in Katie's head were so real and scary that she started to cry hard. Tom looked at his wife with worried eyes. Lisa checked her watch again and saw they only had 30 minutes before their flight. "Tom, we need to go," Lisa said. "The line is getting long, and you know how slow security can be." But Katie grabbed both her parents' hands with all her strength. "Please, please don't make me get on that airplane. And don't let anyone else get on it either. Something terrible is going to happen." An old lady named Helen Carter was standing nearby with her small suitcase. She had gray hair and a kind face. She was going to Florida to visit her grandchildren for their birthday party. She heard Katie crying and came over to help. "Is everything okay, dear?" Helen asked Lisa. "Your little girl seems very upset." "She's scared of flying," Lisa explained. "It's her first time on an airplane and she's having some kind of panic attack." Katie looked right at Helen with her big brown eyes full of tears. "Ma'am, please don't get on that airplane either. Call your grandchildren and tell them you'll come see them next week instead. Please." Helen smiled at Katie the way adults smile at children when they think they're being silly. "Oh, sweetie, I've been flying in airplanes for many, many years. There's nothing to be afraid of. Airplanes are much safer than cars." "But this one isn't safe," Katie said. "This one is going to crash into the ocean." More people were staring now. Some looked annoyed because Katie was being loud. Others felt sorry for the scared little girl. A few people moved away because they didn't want to hear about airplane crashes before their own flights. The voice on the airport speakers said, "Flight 447 to Miami is now ready for boarding. All passengers please come to gate 12. Lisa picked up their bags and started walking toward the gate. "Come on, Katie. We have to go now, or we'll miss our vacation." But Katie wouldn't move. She sat down right on the floor of the airport and refused to get up. "I'm not getting on that airplane, and you shouldn't either." Tom looked at the long line of people walking toward gate 12. He saw families with excited children. He saw business people checking their phones. He saw Helen Carter showing her ticket to the gate agent. All these people were about to get on Flight 447. His little girl had never acted like this before. Katie was usually happy and easy to get along with. She loved adventures and new things. But now she was more scared than he had ever seen her. Tom thought about all the times Katie had been right about things before. Like when she told him not to let their dog Max go outside the day before a big tree fell in their yard. Or when she said they should take a different road to school the morning there was a big car accident on their usual street. Katie had always been special that way. She seemed to know things before they happened. Tom had never understood how, but he had learned to pay attention when his daughter had strong feelings about something. The airport speakers announced again, "This is the final boarding call for Flight 447 to Miami." Tom looked at his wife, then at his crying daughter, then at all the people getting on the airplane. He had to make a choice that would change everything. Tom Johnson stood in the middle of the busy airport with his heart beating fast. His 8-year-old daughter Katie sat on the floor crying, refusing to get on Flight 447. His wife Lisa looked at her watch for the 10th time in 5 minutes. The final boarding call had just been announced over the speakers. "Tom, we have to go right now," Lisa said, her voice getting tight with worry. "They're going to close the gate. We'll lose all our money, and Katie will be so sad when she realizes we missed our chance to see the dolphins." Katie looked up at her parents with tears running down her cheeks. "I won't be sad, Mommy. I'll be happy, because we'll all still be alive." Other passengers walked past them toward gate 12. A young couple with matching t-shirts laughed about something funny. A businessman talked loudly on his phone about a meeting in Miami. 3 college students compared pictures on their phones of the beach resort where they planned to stay. Tom watched all these people and felt sick to his stomach. His daughter was telling him that everyone getting on that airplane was going to die, but how could an 8-year-old girl know something like that? It seemed impossible. Lisa knelt down next to Katie and tried to speak in a calm voice. "Sweetheart, I know you're scared, but think about all the fun things we plan to do. We're going to build sandcastles on the beach and eat ice cream by the ocean. You've been looking forward to this trip for months." "I don't care about ice cream," Katie said. "I care about staying alive. And I care about all those people getting on the airplane. They don't know what's going to happen to them." A security guard named Officer Mike Rodriguez noticed the commotion and walked over to see if he could help. He was a friendly man with a thick mustache who had worked at the airport for 15 years. He had seen many scared passengers before. "Is there a problem here?" Officer Rodriguez asked in a kind voice. "Our daughter is afraid to fly," Tom explained. "She's having a panic attack and won't get on the plane." Officer Rodriguez smiled at Katie. "Hey there, little lady. I bet this is your first time flying, right? It can be pretty scary when you don't know what to expect." Katie shook her head hard. "It's not my first time being scared. But I've never had dreams like this before. I can see exactly what's going to happen to that airplane, and it's terrible." "What kind of dreams?" Officer Rodriguez asked, genuinely curious. Katie closed her eyes and took a deep breath. "The airplane takes off okay at first. Everyone is happy and talking. But then when it gets really high in the sky, something breaks inside the engine. There's a loud bang and black smoke starts coming out. The airplane starts shaking really bad." Her voice got quieter as she continued. "The pilot tries to fix it, but he can't. The airplane starts falling down toward the ocean. People are screaming and holding on to each other. Some people are praying. Then it hits the water really hard and everything goes dark." Officer Rodriguez looked surprised. Most scared children just said they didn't want to fly. They didn't give detailed descriptions of airplane crashes. He had never heard anything quite like this before. The speakers announced again, Flight 447 is preparing for departure. Any remaining passengers must board immediately. Lisa stood up and brushed off her red dress. That's it. We're going to miss the flight completely. She looked angry and disappointed. Katie, do you understand that Daddy saved money for 6 months to pay for this vacation? Do you know how hard he worked extra hours so we could afford this trip? Tom put his hand on Lisa's shoulder. Honey, maybe we should listen to her. You know how Katie has always been different. Remember when she was 3 years old and refused to let us drive to your sister's house? We found out later there was a huge accident on that road at exactly the time we would have been there. That was just a coincidence, Lisa said, but her voice wasn't as sure as her words. What about when she told us not to let Max outside the day before that big storm? Tom continued. The tree that fell would have killed him if he had been in his usual spot in the yard. Officer Rodriguez listened to this conversation with growing interest. He had heard stories about people who seemed to know things before they happened, but he had never met anyone like that in person. Katie stood up and walked over to a family nearby. They had 2 little boys about her age who were excited about going to Disney World. The mom was taking pictures of the boys holding their Mickey Mouse ears. Excuse me, Katie said to the mom. Please don't get on Flight 447. Something bad is going to happen to it. The woman looked confused and a little annoyed. What are you talking about, honey? Where are your parents? Tom quickly walked over. I'm sorry, ma'am, my daughter is having some anxiety about flying. But Katie kept talking to the woman. I'm not anxious. I'm trying to help you. That airplane is going to crash into the ocean. Your little boys will be scared and there won't be anything you can do to help them. The woman's face went white. She picked up her younger son and held him tight. What's wrong with your daughter? Why would she say something so horrible? She has bad dreams sometimes, Lisa said quickly, rushing over to get Katie. We're really sorry. She doesn't mean to upset anyone. But more people had heard Katie talking, and word was spreading through the gate area. A man with a beard started talking to his wife about whether they should get on the flight. An elderly couple looked nervous and kept glancing at Katie. Helen Carter, the nice old lady who had tried to comfort Katie earlier, walked up to Tom. Sir, I don't want to interfere, but your daughter seems very upset. Maybe you should consider postponing your trip. I've raised 5 children of my own, and I've never seen a child this frightened about something specific. We can't postpone it, Lisa said. The hotel won't refund our money, and Tom already took time off work. We planned this vacation for months, the gate agent announced over the intercom. This is the absolute final call for Flight 447. The aircraft door will be closing in 2 minutes. Tom looked at the gate where the last few passengers were showing their boarding passes. He looked at his wife, who had tears in her eyes from frustration and disappointment. Then he looked at his daughter, who was still shaking and crying. Katie grabbed both her parents' hands. Daddy, Mommy, I'm begging you. I know you think I'm just a scared little girl, but I'm not making this up. I can see it happening like I'm watching a movie. Please don't make me get on that airplane. Please don't get on it yourselves. Tom had worked around airplanes his whole adult life. He knew how safe they were supposed to be. He knew the statistics about flying being safer than driving, but he also knew his daughter, and he had never seen her like this before. The gate agent started walking toward the airplane door with her hand on the radio, ready to tell the pilot that all passengers were aboard. Tom Johnson had to make the hardest decision of his life in the next 30 seconds. Tom Johnson looked at his crying daughter one last time. Katie's small hands were shaking as she held onto his shirt. Her brown eyes were full of fear, but also full of hope that her daddy would believe her. The gate agent was about to close the doors to Flight 447. Lisa stood with their bags ready to run to the gate. She looked at Tom with confusion and anger in her eyes. I can't do it, Tom said quietly. I can't put my family on that airplane. Lisa's mouth dropped open. What do you mean? Tom, we have to go now, or we'll miss it completely. Tom picked up Katie and held her close. We're not getting on Flight 447, we're going home. Are you crazy? Lisa shouted. People around them stopped and stared. We spent $1,500 on this trip. The hotel is paid for. You took 3 days off work. We can't just throw it all away because of a child's bad dream. But Tom was already walking away from gate 12. Katie wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered, "Thank you, Daddy. Thank you for believing me." Lisa stood there for a moment, not knowing what to do. She could still catch the flight if she ran, but she couldn't leave her husband and daughter behind. With tears of anger and disappointment running down her face, she picked up their bags and followed Tom. They found seats in the airport restaurant that had big windows looking out at the runway. Lisa sat down hard in her chair and put her head in her hands. "I can't believe we just did that. I can't believe we just wasted all that money." Tom ordered coffee for himself and Lisa, and hot chocolate for Katie. The little girl had stopped crying now that they were away from the airplane. She sat quietly next to her daddy, watching Flight 447 through the window. "When will the airplane be far away?" Katie asked. Tom looked at his watch. It was 12:45 in the afternoon. "The flight takes about 2.5 hours. They should land in Miami around 3:15. Katie nodded and kept watching the airplane. Other passengers were still getting on board. She could see Helen Carter, the nice old lady, walking up the steps into the plane. She saw the family with the 2 little boys who wanted to go to Disney World. She saw the college students who were excited about their beach vacation. "I wish they would listen to me," Katie said sadly. "I wish I could make them understand." Lisa looked up from her hands. "Katie, I need you to explain something to me. How do you see these things before they happen? How is that possible?" Katie shrugged her shoulders. "I don't know, Mommy. Sometimes pictures just come into my head, like when I'm watching TV. But the TV is inside my brain. Usually the pictures are about small things, like when it's going to rain or when Max is going to get sick. But this time the pictures were really big and scary." "But how can you see the future?" Lisa asked. "That's not something people can do." "Some people can," Tom said quietly. "My grandmother used to have dreams about things before they happened. She predicted when my grandfather would die down to the exact day. She knew when there would be floods or bad storms. People in our town used to come ask her questions about what was going to happen." Lisa looked at her husband with surprise. "You never told me that before." "I never thought it mattered," Tom said. "But maybe Katie got the same gift from my grandmother." At exactly 1:15, Flight 447 started moving away from the gate. Katie pressed her face against the window and watched it taxi toward the runway. The airplane looked normal and safe to everyone else, but Katie still felt scared when she looked at it. "It's moving now," Katie said. "All those people are inside and they don't know what's going to happen to them." The airplane waited in line with other planes that were taking off. Tom, Lisa, and Katie sat in silence watching. Finally, at 1:28, Flight 447 started rolling down the runway. It went faster and faster until it lifted off the ground and flew up into the sky. "There it goes," Tom said. "Maybe everything will be fine and you were just having a bad dream after all." But Katie shook her head. "It wasn't a dream, Daddy. You'll see." They ordered lunch, but nobody felt like eating much. Lisa kept looking at her watch and thinking about all the money they had wasted. Tom kept thinking about whether he had made the right decision. Katie just sat quietly, looking out the window at the sky where Flight 447 had disappeared. At 2:45, they were still sitting in the restaurant. The airplane should have been getting close to Miami by now. Lisa was reading a magazine, trying not to think about their lost vacation. Tom was helping Katie color a picture on her placemat. Then, at exactly 2:58, every television screen in the airport changed to breaking news. The words, "Flight 447 missing," appeared in big red letters across the screen. The restaurant became completely quiet. Everyone stopped talking and looked up at the TVs. The news reporter had a serious look on her face as she spoke. "We have breaking news this afternoon. Flight 447 from Chicago to Miami has lost contact with air traffic control. The aircraft disappeared from radar screens approximately 100 miles from Miami International Airport. Coast Guard ships and rescue helicopters are being sent to search the area where the plane was last seen." Lisa's coffee cup fell from her hands and broke on the floor. Her face turned white as paper. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Oh my God, that's our flight." Tom put his arm around his wife's shoulders. His hands were shaking too. "Katie was right," he said in a voice so quiet that only his family could hear him. She was right. Katie looked at her parents with sad eyes. "I told you, Mommy. I told you something bad was going to happen to that airplane." Other people in the restaurant started talking loudly. Some people were crying because they had friends or family on Flight 447. Airport workers ran around trying to get more information. The news reporters kept saying the same things over and over again. For the next 3 hours, Tom, Lisa, and Katie sat glued to the television screens. They watched as Coast Guard boats searched the ocean. They saw helicopters flying in circles over the water. They heard experts talking about what might have gone wrong with the airplane. At 6:15 that evening, the worst news came. The Coast Guard had found pieces of Flight 447 floating in the Atlantic Ocean. There were no survivors. All 156 people on board the airplane had died, including Helen Carter, the kind old lady who had tried to comfort Katie at the gate. Lisa started, crying and couldn't stop. Not because she was sad about missing their vacation anymore, but because she realized her 8-year-old daughter had saved their lives. If Tom hadn't believed Katie's warning, all 3 of them would have been on that airplane at the bottom of the ocean. Tom held his wife and daughter close as they watched the terrible news on TV. He thought about how close they had come to getting on Flight 447. He thought about all the families who would never see their loved ones again, and he thought about his amazing little girl who had somehow known this was going to happen. Katie didn't say, "I told you so." She just sat quietly between her parents, sad that so many people had died, but grateful that her family was safe because her daddy had finally listened to her warning. The Johnson family drove home from the airport in complete silence. Tom's hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as he tried to focus on the road. Lisa sat in the passenger seat staring out the window, her face still pale from shock. Katie was in the back seat, looking small and tired after the longest day of her young life. When they got home, Tom parked in their driveway and turned off the car. Nobody moved for several minutes. Their house looked exactly the same as when they had left that morning, but everything felt different now. They were supposed to be in Florida, walking on the beach and getting ready for dinner at a fancy restaurant. Instead, they were home because their 8-year-old daughter had saved their lives. "I need to call my boss," Tom said finally. "I need to tell him why I'm not in Florida." Lisa nodded but didn't say anything. She was still trying to understand what had happened. How could Katie have known about the airplane crash? How was something like that even possible? Inside the house, Katie went straight to her room and lay down on her bed with her stuffed elephant Peanut. She was exhausted from crying and being scared all day, but she was also relieved that her family was safe at home instead of at the bottom of the ocean. Tom called his supervisor at the airline repair shop. "Hi, Mr. Johnson. This is Tom. I know I'm supposed to be in Florida right now, but something happened today." His boss, Mr. Rick Palmer, sounded confused. "What do you mean? Something happened? Did you miss your flight?" "Not exactly," Tom said. "My daughter had a feeling that our flight was going to crash, so we didn't get on it. Flight 447 went down this afternoon. Everyone on board died." There was a long silence on the phone. "Are you telling me your little girl predicted an airplane crash?" "I know it sounds crazy," Tom said. "But she was so scared and specific about what was going to happen. She saved our lives." Mr. Palmer had worked with airplanes for 25 years. He had never heard anything like this before. "Tom, I saw the news about Flight 447. That was a terrible tragedy. I'm glad you and your family are safe, but I don't understand how a child could know something like that was going to happen." "I don't understand it either," Tom admitted, "but I'm grateful I listened to her." The next morning, their neighbor, Mrs. Betty Wright, came over with a casserole and a worried look on her face. She had heard about Flight 447 on the news and remembered that the Johnsons were supposed to be on vacation in Florida. "Tom, I was so scared when I heard about that airplane crash," Mrs. Wright said at the front door. "Then I remembered you were flying to Florida yesterday. Are you all okay? What happened?" Tom invited her inside and told her the whole story. Mrs. Wright listened with her mouth open, hardly believing what she was hearing. You mean little Katie knew the airplane was going to crash before it happened? Mrs. Wright asked. That's sweet. Little girl who helps me carry my groceries? She tried to warn other passengers too, Tom said. But nobody would listen to her except us. Mrs. Wright shook her head in amazement. I've heard stories about people who can see the future, but I never thought I'd meet someone like that. Katie is a very special little girl. Word spread quickly through their neighborhood. By Tuesday morning, 3 different reporters had called the Johnson house asking for interviews. A woman from Channel 7 News wanted to do a story about the little girl who predicted the plane crash. A man from the newspaper wanted to write an article about Katie's warning. Lisa answered the phone calls and politely said no to all of them. We want to keep our daughter's life as normal as possible, she told each reporter. She's been through enough already. But the story got out anyway. Someone at the airport must have remembered seeing the Johnson family leave Flight 447's gate at the last minute. By Wednesday, Katie's name was on the internet and local news stations were talking about the 8-year-old girl who had refused to board the doomed flight. At school, Katie's teacher, Mrs. Rachel Green, pulled her aside during lunch. Katie, I heard about what happened with your family and the airplane. Are you feeling okay about everything? Katie nodded. I'm sad that all those people died, Mrs. Green. I tried to tell them not to get on the airplane, but they didn't believe me. Mrs. Green had been teaching children for 15 years, but she had never had a student quite like Katie. How did you know the airplane was going to crash, sweetie? Sometimes I see pictures in my mind of things that haven't happened yet, Katie explained. Usually they're small things, like when my goldfish is going to get sick, or when it's going to rain, really hard. But this time the pictures were about something really big and scary. That afternoon, a child psychologist named Dr. Amanda Foster called the Johnson house. She had heard about Katie's story and wanted to help the family understand what had happened. I study children who have experiences like your daughter's, Dr. Foster explained to Tom and Lisa. What Katie went through is more common than most people think. Some children seem to have heightened intuitive abilities that can't be easily explained by science. Lisa felt a little better talking to someone who didn't think her daughter was crazy or making things up. Dr. Foster, Katie has always been different. She knows things before they happen, but we never thought it was anything this serious. Has she had other accurate predictions? Dr. Foster asked. Tom told her about the time Katie warned them not to let their dog outside before a tree fell in their yard. He mentioned how she had predicted when Lisa's mother would get sick and need to go to the hospital. He talked about several other times when Katie had known things were going to happen before they did. These experiences suggest that Katie may have what some people call precognitive abilities, Dr. Foster said. She seems to be able to sense future events, especially ones involving danger or important changes. Is she going to be okay? Lisa asked. Will she be able to have a normal childhood? Most children with these abilities learn to manage them as they get older, Dr. Foster said. The important thing is to believe Katie when she tells you about her feelings and visions. Don't dismiss them as imagination or fears. That evening, Katie sat with her parents at the dinner table. She had been quiet all day, thinking about Flight 447 and all the people who had died. Mommy, Daddy, Katie said softly. I keep thinking about that nice old lady at the airport, Mrs. Carter. She was going to see her grandchildren, and now she never will. Lisa reached over and held Katie's hand. Sweetie, what happened to Flight 447 was not your fault. You tried to warn people. You did everything you could. But maybe I could have done more, Katie said. Maybe if I had yelled louder or made a bigger scene, more people would have listened to me. Tom knelt down next to his daughter's chair. Katie, you saved our family. You are the bravest, most special little girl in the world. Don't ever think that what happened to those other people was your fault. Katie looked at her parents with tears in her eyes. What if it happens again? What if I see something bad coming and nobody believes me? We'll always believe you, Lisa promised. From now on, if you tell us something is dangerous, we'll listen. And we'll help you figure out what to do. That night, Katie had trouble sleeping. She kept thinking about all the families who were crying because their loved ones had been on Flight 447. She wondered if her special ability to see the future was a gift or a curse. It felt heavy and scary to know things that other people didn't know. But she was grateful that her mommy and daddy finally understood that she was different, and she was happy that her family was safe at home instead of at the bottom of the ocean. Maybe her scary visions were meant to help people, even if it was hard to live with such a big responsibility. 2 years had passed since the terrible day when Flight 447 crashed into the ocean. Katie Johnson was now 10 years old and in the 4th grade. She had grown taller and her brown hair was longer, but she still had the same kind eyes and gentle way of speaking. The Johnson family had learned to live with Katie's special gift. Tom had changed jobs after the airplane crash. He couldn't bear to work on aircraft engines anymore, knowing how many people died when planes failed. Now he worked at the airport fixing the trucks and cars that moved around on the ground. It was still a good job, and he felt better knowing he wasn't working on machines that flew high in the sky. Lisa had found a new purpose in life. She started a support group for families who had lost loved ones in airplane accidents. Every Tuesday evening, people came to their community center to talk about their grief and help each other heal. Lisa found that helping others made her feel better about surviving when so many other people had died. Katie still had visions from time to time, but they were usually about smaller things. She had learned to pay attention to the feelings in her stomach and the pictures that came into her mind. Sometimes she was right, and sometimes she was wrong, but her parents always listened to her now. One morning in October, Katie woke up feeling worried about their neighbor, Mr. Bobby Clark. He was a nice man who lived next door with his wife and always helped people in the neighborhood fix their cars or mow their lawns. "Mommy," Katie said at breakfast, "I think something bad is going to happen to Mr. Clark today." Lisa looked up from packing Katie's lunch. "What kind of something bad, sweetheart?" Katie closed her eyes and tried to see the pictures in her mind more clearly. "I can see him falling down in his driveway. His chest hurts really bad and he can't breathe. Mrs. Clark is screaming for help." Tom and Lisa looked at each other across the kitchen table. They had learned to take Katie's warning seriously, even when they seemed unlikely. "Mr. Clark looked fine yesterday when I saw him working in his garden," Lisa said, "but maybe we should keep an eye on him today." At lunchtime, Lisa was making sandwiches when she heard Katie running down the stairs. "Mommy, call 911 right now. Mr. Clark is going to have a heart attack in 5 minutes. Lisa didn't ask questions. She picked up the phone and dialed 911. "This is going to sound strange," she told the operator, "but I think my neighbor is about to have a heart attack. Could you please send an ambulance to 1247 Oak Street?" The operator sounded confused. "Ma'am, is your neighbor having chest pains? Right now, is he conscious?" "He doesn't know anything is wrong yet," Lisa said, "but please trust me. He's going to need help very soon." The operator put Lisa on hold and talked to her supervisor. Meanwhile, Katie stood by the front window watching Mr. Clark's house. "The ambulance needs to hurry, Mommy. It's going to happen. Soon." 5 minutes later, an ambulance pulled up in front of the Clark house. The paramedics, Jim Watson and Karen Mills, got out looking confused. They had been told to check on a man who might be having a heart attack, but they didn't see any emergency. Just as they walked up to Mr. Clark's front door, he came out of his garage carrying a heavy toolbox. Suddenly, he dropped the toolbox and grabbed his chest. His face turned gray and he fell down on his driveway exactly like Katie had seen in her vision. Mrs. Clark ran outside screaming for help, but the paramedics were already there. They quickly gave Mr. Clark medicine and put him in the ambulance. Later, doctors at the hospital said that if the ambulance had arrived even 10 minutes later, Mr. Clark would have died. "How did you know to call 911? Mrs. Clark asked Lisa that evening. "The paramedics said you called before Bobby even had his heart attack. How is that possible?" Lisa looked at Katie, who was coloring quietly at the kitchen table. "My daughter has a special gift. She can sometimes see things before they happen." Mrs. Clark stared at Katie with amazement. "You mean this little girl saved my husband's life?" Katie looked up from her coloring book. "I'm glad the ambulance got there in time, Mrs. Clark. I was worried about Mr. Clark all day." Word spread through the neighborhood about how Katie had predicted Mr. Clark's heart attack. Some people thought it was amazing. Others thought it was strange and maybe a little scary. But everyone agreed that Katie had helped save a man's life. A few months later, Katie had another vision at school. During math class, she suddenly felt worried about her teacher, Mrs. Nancy Ross. Pictures flashed in her mind of Mrs. Ross driving her car and another car hitting her. "Mrs. Ross," Katie said, raising her hand, "I think you should go home early today. Please don't drive on Maple Street after it gets dark." Mrs. Ross looked puzzled. "Why, Katie? Is there something wrong?" Katie didn't want to scare her teacher, but she also didn't want her to get hurt. "I just have a feeling that you should be extra careful driving today. Maybe you could leave school before the sun goes down." Mrs. Ross had heard about Katie's prediction of Mr. Clark's heart attack. She didn't completely understand how a 10-year-old girl could know things before they happened, but she decided to trust Katie's warning. That afternoon, Mrs. Ross left school an hour early instead of staying late to grade papers like she usually did. At 6:30 that evening, while she was driving home in daylight, another driver ran a red light and crashed into her car on Maple Street. Mrs. Ross was hurt, but not badly. The doctor said she had a broken arm and some bruises, but she would be fine. If the accident had happened in the dark like Katie had seen in her vision, it might have been much worse. "Katie probably saved my life," Mrs. Ross told the principal the next day. "If I had been driving in the dark like I usually do, I might not have seen that other car coming." Dr. Amanda Foster, the child psychologist who had been helping the Johnson family, visited them again to see how Katie was handling her abilities as she got older. "How do you feel about being able to help people?" Dr. Foster asked Katie during one of their talks. Katie thought carefully before answering. "Sometimes it's scary to see bad things before they happen, but I'm happy when I can help people stay safe. I just wish I could help everyone." "You can't save everyone, Katie," Dr. Foster said gently. "But you've already helped more people than most adults do in their whole lives. That's something to be proud of." Every year on the anniversary of Flight 447's crash, the Johnson family visited a memorial garden that had been built for the people who died. They brought flowers and said prayers for Helen Carter and all the other passengers who hadn't been as lucky as they were. "Do you ever wish you didn't have this gift?" Lisa asked Katie during one of these visits. Katie stood quietly for a moment, looking at the memorial stones with all the names of people who had died. "Sometimes I do wish I was just a normal kid who didn't see scary things in her mind. But then I think about Mr. Clark and Mrs. Ross and how they're still alive because I warned them. So I guess I'm glad I can help people, even when it's hard." Tom put his arm around his daughter's shoulders. "We're proud of you, Katie. You use your gift to help others, and that makes you very special." As they walked back to their car, Katie felt grateful for her family and for the chance to make a difference in people's lives. She still didn't understand why she could see the future, but she had learned that some questions didn't need answers. What mattered was using her gift to help keep people safe, one warning at a time.